All right, Shonali Bassick is here with me now to dive into today's quick take focus, which is going to be about football, soccer, and racism. This morning, we saw the Great Britain's women's football team, or soccer if you're here in the U.S., take a knee before their Tokyo 2020 Olympic soccer match against Chile. The first time the anti-racism stance has been seen at the Olympics. The IOC loosened a decades-long ban on expressions of protest before these games. Shonali, this protest, of course, in response to a range of things, but specifically the treatment of the England national team's black players after the Euro 2020 Cup last week, definitely getting a lot more attention, and an issue that we've seen for a number of years, but we're actually seeing players take a stance like this.
Yeah, and of course, we've seen racism play out online in so many different forms. The question then becomes, what is the role of the social media companies? What is the role of politicians and lawmakers to prevent this from happening? And also, what is the role of the athletes themselves who are stepping up and really speaking out against this? Remember Marcus Rashford tweeting about a few weeks ago that he can critique his performance all day long, Jen, but he will never apologize for who he is and where he came from. So to talk about this, to push this forward, to think about how this can change is Paul Canaville. He's a former professional English football player and Chelsea's first black player. He is the founder of the Paul Canaville Foundation, which aims to address the rising inequalities and mental illness in youth. We're also joined by Quick Take reporter Alex Webb. We thank you so much for being here. Paul, as a former footballer, what was your reaction to the treatment of the English players? And how does this kind of stand out in the broader scope of racism you've seen throughout the decades?
With that, hearing it and seeing the game as well, it was very tough for three young lads to take a penalty. And I would know, trust me, put your hand to take the penalty in a big game like it was. And unfortunate in what happened, but for what they received after, it was disappointing, it was anger and disrespectful. And something had to be done right this moment with regards to the Met Police to investigate. With the Met Police, I regard this as the relationship they have with the black community. This would probably help. I'm not saying it will be the fault or the doubt, but it would probably help. As well as that, the FA. The FA, the Premiership, they need to now look into this seriously. And it is about talking about solutions. And that's one that has to be discussed with the organisations.
Absolutely. Alex, let's bring you in here. Of course, as we mentioned, racism, racist acts, racist abuse of players has been going on for decades. But what role has social media sort of played in sort of what we're seeing right now in regards to social abuse, racial abuse of players?
When it's essentially, it's a hotline straight to the players in a sense. You know, they post on their social media and people have people are able to respond, often in, utterly vile and despicable ways. That is not something that perhaps was as easy in the past. Of course, Paul had horrendous experiences in the stadium. I don't know whether it would have been quite the same if people calling him up with thousands and thousands of messages. So you've got this racism manifesting itself in a very different way, and it's a challenge which I certainly think the social media companies are not really stepping up to just yet.
I want to get back to the social media aspect of this, but Paul, I'm wondering how you would handle this issue. What are some of the solutions that you would recommend?
Well, the solutions is obviously that, like my colleague said, the social media have not been dealing with this. And you've got to understand, this is more than once. This is several times this has been happening throughout the years. And the social media, like, for instance, a month ago, was told that we're going to boycott the social media. And I just put on my hand and said, no, why? We haven't done anything wrong. And with that, for the 4 days that we boycotted, looks what happened. It's come back to us in our face again. So with social media, it's the government, and don't get me wrong, government football don't mix. But they need to step up now and step in and say, you know what, you're not doing your job, you're not monitoring what's going on social media. We're going to give you a strict fine, a serious fine, and maybe close you down for 4 or 5 days and see how you like that. That's what needs to be done, show seriousness to all of us, not just myself, the black players itself, and everybody. They shouldn't have to go through that. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable.
That solution that you just mentioned, that idea of shutting the social media platforms down, Alex, how possible is that to do? Can they be fined for not doing more to prevent racism on social media? Can Twitter, can Facebook be targeted by lawmakers to make a difference here?
So there is legislation in the works in the UK called the Online Harms Bill, which will give the government the power to impose a fine representing 10% of global revenue for these companies. So put that in context, Facebook makes about $94 billion a year in revenue. That could be a $9.5 billion fine. That, of course, is unlikely to be the case to that extent. Equally, just look at the cost of something like this. UK has something like 17,500 professional athletes. I follow 3,000 people on Twitter alone. So extrapolate from that, let's say that's 6 times more than I follow. You could have 6 people covering all the social media accounts of every athlete in the country. Social media monitors earn $52,000 a year. So for a cost of something like several million pounds, you could have people actively monitoring every athlete's account in the country to ensure they're not encountering racist abuse. Now, put that on a global scale and you're getting into billions, but Facebook can employ hundreds of thousands of media monitors and still be generating very healthy free cash flow. Like, this is a problem that is easily solvable, and not just through AI. That might be the solution in the medium to long term, but in the immediate term, there are things you can do just by employing more headcount.
And Alex, do we have any indication that they're taking this seriously and doing something in the near term to sort of address where we're at right now?
Well, they do publish figures which show that hate speech is declining on their platforms. You can make the case that some hate speech is still too much hate speech, and I think that that is. I mean, I'm interested to hear, Paul, your experience. How many voices does it count to feel it as an athlete? I can guess, but presumably even just one voice is too much as far as you're concerned. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
To be honest, my experience for 3 years having racism for a minority of a group, my own fans, and even to hear just one voice, and you can imagine 20 voices whilst I warmed up down the sideline, that was off-putting. That wasn't a confidence booster for me to go on the pitch. It felt like I had the battle of playing twice as better than my teammates just to get accepted. But like you mentioned, I'm so glad that we didn't have social media back when I was playing. Can you imagine? Oh my God! But something needs to be done. It's too far gone now, and the government, FA, the Met Police have to step up and show us how they're dealing with this and how they're going to take seriousness.
Paul, what would you like to see the government do to step up? What kind of a response is appropriate? Clearly, Boris Johnson has gotten a great degree of criticism for not stepping up enough, but what is the right example here to set? Well,
like your colleague said, monitoring has to be done and taken seriously. That means getting more employment and so forth. I've been hearing about the social medias, how they don't have enough people. I'm sorry, you make enough money that you can afford to employ some. Definitely, after that game, that European game, everybody phoned me up to say, what's expected the next day. So you're telling me social media didn't know what to expect. They knew what to expect. So they should have been on it. That's what I thought. So, yeah, it's taken them far too long now. And seriousness of government needs to step in. And that's the only time, as far as I'm concerned, to step in here and show some instinct, show some passion, at least, and tell them you're not doing your job. This is what we're going to do. After that, the FA, Premiership, negotiate, and this is where they need to start discussing about solutions to protect, not myself, protect those young black players of today. And hopefully we're going to see that. We're waiting to hear. They've arrested a couple of players, fans that were, on social media with their racial abuse, and we'd like to see the results of that. So it is about mouth and hair. Or should I say hair, mouth? The result of what's going on.
Paul, you stick with us. We'll chat more about this in the next block. And Alex, thank you for your time. We're looking forward to hearing more about these experiences in just a minute. You're streaming Quicktake. We're back with former English footballer Paul Canaville. Paul, I'd love to hear more about your experience as Chelsea's first black player. You mentioned that you felt like you needed to work twice as hard. What was that like? And what kind of toll did that sometimes take mentally, perhaps?
It was mentally, because every day playing the game, going home thinking, what could I have done better? What could I have done good? And it wasn't my fault, you know what I mean? But I had that feeling, what can improve? And like when I made my debut against Crystal Palace, it was the excitement of a young lad thinking, yeah, this is where he wanted to be in the first team. And being told to warm up in the second half, thinking, yes, I know what I want to do. And I feel I've got the beating of this right back. And you start to warm up and receive this racism. And like, you think, wow, the opposing fans, they're really trying to put me off. And let's not pay attention. But then to find out and look, and it was my own fans, that was daunting. That was like, whoa, I didn't even want to get on the pitch. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to get stripped. I had to get stripped. I stood by the sideline and I was constantly waiting for the referee's whistle to blow. With that, I just ran straight into the changing room, sat in the corner. You got to understand that. And in football will tell you that one thing about going in the changing room, there's a whole heap of banter. You'll be talking about the game, talking about issues, talking about situations. But this changing room was quiet because my teammates had heard. They couldn't listen. They heard what was going on. What could they tell me? What could they ask me? How am I? They knew how I was. So with that, my manager, and I rest in peace, John Neal, because he gave me my opportunity. He gave me my chance. And he told me, boy, Paul, I can understand how you're feeling, but these same ignorant fans are the ones who's paying your wages. What do you want to do about it? And that's where I've had to go away. And I had the constant phone calls from family members, cousins that saying, why do you want to play for a racist side? Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't, Chelsea weren't racist. It was just a minority, ignorant fans that were following the National Front, following a program that, you know, man, didn't accept or respected black people as such. That's how I looked at it. Right. But the battle was for me to, fight that. Either I walked away or I continued playing. And I continued playing. Don't get me wrong, you can understand how my parent that came over the Windrush and what they received. And it was difficult then. And I had to grow up in that period, 1960s, 70s.
Right.
And here we was, you know what I mean, seeing this. I didn't expect this to receive this at all in 1980. And now to see where we are, 2000, this is nearly 30, 40 years.
Right.
And still receiving it?
So,
no.
And Paul, I wonder, what guidance would you have for these young players as this conversation continues to move forward? As you mentioned, there's a lot of pressure that they were on stepping up to the pitch and taking those PKs. But moving forward, how do they handle this? How would you advise them?
The close confidence of themselves. They know their abilities. Yeah, you can't be taking in, because if we took on every person's word, humane humility of crushing us and pulling us down, then it don't make sense us playing football. It don't make sense you being a professional football. You knew why you were going to be a professional football. You knew why you're here. You have to ignore that. Don't get me wrong, but the authorities, that I keep saying, which is the FA, the Premiership, need to show their support and need to have their backs. And that's what needs to be happening right now.
Paul Cannavale, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being with us today. Really powerful words for us today on Focus. All right, that'll do it for Quick Take this hour, but there's more Quick Take coming up in just a minute. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja.
And I'm Shanali Basak. You can check out the latest stories at Bloomberg.com or Quick Take on social media. Thank you for watching.